I have the pleasure of introducing Congressman Cedric Richmond. One moment. Cedric Richmond was born and raised in New Orleans. Congressman Cedric Richmond is a strong believer in the value of mentorship in his hometown. He is a graduate of Benjamin Franklin High School, earned his undergraduate degree from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, and his law degree from Tulane University School of Law here in New Orleans. Congressman Richmond is also a graduate of the Harvard University Executive Education Program. Congressman Richmond represents Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. He currently serves on the House Committee on Homeland Security and the House Committee on the Judiciary. Congressman Richmond also currently serves as assistant to the Majority Whip and is the immediate past chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and a member of the New Democratic Coalition. Please welcome Congressman Cedric Richmond.
She's in love with who I am. Back in high school, I used to bust it to the dance. Now I hit that FBO with duffels in my hands. I did half as 13 hours till I...
Good morning. I want to say how impressed I am and say thank you for the introduction. And I get introduced all the time, and people always talk about, I finished from Ben Franklin, went on to Morehouse, went to Tulane Law School, went on to Harvard for a couple weeks. What they never mention is the part that I'm most proud of. When I tell people who I am, I tell people I'm the son of a public school teacher, my mother. I tell them that I grew up in New Orleans East. I played at Goretti Playground. I went to Osborne. I went to Livingston. I went to Kennedy. I went to St. Aug. I went to Ben Franklin. See, I went to a whole bunch of schools because I kept getting invited to go to different schools, but I kept getting invited to leave also. But the reason why I tell you that is because I was exactly who you are right now. I was a kid trying to make it in New Orleans. And I always knew that if I worked hard enough with the right people pushing me, that I would achieve what I wanted to achieve. And let me just be honest with you. I've achieved more than I thought I would. Because I wanted to be a lawyer, I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer so that I could fight in the criminal justice system, so that I can help kids who are wrongly accused, help fathers come back home to their families, help right the mass incarceration that the crack epidemic caused. That's why I just wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. I had no idea that I would get so frustrated because I couldn't get uniforms for my Little League team at Goretti that I would run for state rep. And then I would see the devastation of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita and say I have to do more. So I decided to run for Congress. And by the way, I lost the first time. And I didn't let that stop me because what I wanted to achieve was that important. So then when I got to Congress, I realized I didn't have to be that criminal attorney to change the criminal justice system. I could work with senators and congresspeople, and I could just do more. I didn't have to just change it for New Orleans. I could change it for the whole country. So the good news is, about 4 weeks ago, Senator Booker and I passed a bill to change the criminal justice system and how it affects everybody in this country. And because of that, 5,000 people who were overly charged because of crack cocaine, unlike how other people get charged with powder cocaine, those people are coming home today because Cory Booker and I decided that enough was enough. So just remember, be true to who you are and work hard, and you will achieve what you want to achieve. Now look, this is not about me today because it's about my special friend who decided to come here, and when Jamar asked, he said, Cedric, who could really talk to our kids and inspire them? And so I started thinking about a whole bunch of people. Then I thought about Cory, not as the U.S. Senator, but I thought about Cory as the mayor. When Cory became mayor of Newark, kids had better access to guns and drugs than they did textbooks and computers. When he left mayor of Newark, kids had better access to textbooks and computers than they did guns and drugs. He reformed a city. So I just want you all to know that where Cory is now in the United States Senate and where he is in his life, Cory has to make some really big decisions over the next couple of weeks. He has to decide whether this is the country that he wants it to be, or he has to take another step and make it the country he wants it to be. And I want you to know that 10 years ago, 11 years ago, there was another African-American male senator who had to make a decision whether the country was the country he wanted it to be or whether he needed to make it the country he wanted it to be. And that senator was Barack Obama, who decided that he would run for president because he believed that together, yes, we could. So even before Cory gets up here, I want us to give Cory the encouragement that he needs to make that decision. So we need to say, run, Cory, run. You have to say it like you mean it. Say, run, Cory, run. Well, with that, I won't say any more. Cory, you always said you listen to the kids. Thank you all.
In 1996, Booker moved to Newark, New Jersey, and founded a nonprofit organization to provide legal services for low-income families, helping tenants take on slumlords, improve their living conditions, and stay in their homes. At age 29, Booker had selected to the Newark City Council, and beginning in 2006, he served as Newark's mayor for more than 7 years. Booker is the first African-American elected to the U.S. Senate from New Jersey. In the Senate, Booker has fought to resist President Trump's damaging policies and blatant disregard for fundamental American values. He's also championed policies that advance economic and equal justice, including leading efforts to reform the broken criminal justice system, increasing wages, ensure hard work is fairly rewarded, and protect the rights of all Americans to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Please welcome Senator Cory Booker.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I have to confess before I even begin that I was blown away by the talent I saw here already. The young folks who came up with spoken word and poetry, it wasn't just the rhymes and the rhythms of what they talked about. They really spoke to me, and I hope a lot of you, by talking about the struggle and the struggle being real and the obligations that we have. And then there's nothing like a choir coming together and singing to our hearts, inspiring our faith, and giving us encouragement. So today, you all have been a gift to me already, and I don't want to be presumptuous to think that I have got wisdom that you don't already have in your own heart. Sometimes when you just share a little bit about your own experience, what you do is you encourage wisdom in others, because we're all in this together, whether we like it or not. We are, as King said, all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny. So if y'all don't mind, what I just want to do for about 10 minutes is share with you some of my own experiences and the lessons that have been helpful to me, and then get out your way and let's move on with the program. So I'm going to come on down, if you don't mind. And I want you all to know, one of the best lessons I ever got was from my dad, who was this extraordinary man who would tell me stories all my life. Now, I enjoyed his stories, even though by the time I got to my 40s, I had heard the same stories over and over again. But the great thing about my dad with his stories, every time he told them, they got more dramatic and more difficult. You know, the weather in his hometown in the mountains of North Carolina, at first it was hail the size of golf balls. Then it became hail the size of like softballs and footballs and beach balls. Then it's like it was hail the size of Cadillacs coming down. I still remember my dad told me once, he goes, son, let me tell you about the time the tsunami hit my town. And I'm like, Dad, you were in the mountains of North Carolina. There's no way a tsunami hit your town. And my father was like, boy, don't you disrespect me now. It was a long time ago. It happened before the internet. You can't look it up, but it happened. My father tells me one story that is a bad joke, which I'll tell you, but then I want to tell you why it became so meaningful to me. My father told me this story that he was sitting in his classroom. It was one of the first days of school. He said he was in 6th or 7th grade, and a teacher came in. He said it didn't last that long, but the teacher stood in front of the class. First day of school, she wanted to teach the class about self-esteem. And she stood before the class and she said, come on now, class. Anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid? I want you to stand up right now because I need to know who you are. And none of the kids moved. They just looked at the woman like she was a little strange. And she stood there and she said, come on now, you think you're dumb? You think you're stupid? Stand up. And my father said he looked around. Nobody was moving and the teacher was looking impatient. And then finally my father said he pushed his chair back and stood up proudly. And the teacher looks at him and says, Mr. Booker Boy, what's wrong with you? You think you're dumb? You think you're stupid? And my father said, well, shucks, ma'am, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing. I told you it was a bad joke. I warned you. My father said the biggest thing he had to deal with in his life was the low expectations that other people had for him. This black boy growing up in the mountains of North Carolina, poor, he used to say, son, I couldn't afford to be poor. I was just P-O. I couldn't afford the other 2 letters. My father's mother couldn't take care of him. His grandmother raised him for a while, but she couldn't take care of him. My father ended up being taken in by a family in the community. And my father said that his mental state was underestimating what God had planned for him, what his potential was. He was allowing his surroundings to dictate his heart. And he was listening in a world, especially back then, it was Jim Crow was the law of the land, telling him that he was not good enough. And what he told me, the most important transformation that he had to do had nothing to do about external circumstances. It was just about believing and knowing who God created him to be. That no matter how much people try to talk you down, put you down, push you down, that there is something in you that has got to stand up. And you all heard the poetry before. It resonated with that same ideal. It's this ideal that's been written about by poets for the generations. As one poet said, it matters not how full it matters, they may write you down in history with their bitter, twisted lies. They may drive you into the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. You know that poem. It's this idea that no matter what, you have got to rise up. And my father began to tell me, he said, son, what I began to realize is I had 2 things in my life. One was I had to check my own attitude, because that was the most powerful determinant of what kind of day that I could have, that no matter what people do to me, I have the power to choose my way in this world. I tell you, one of my favorite moments from one of my favorite books called Man's Search for Meaning, it is this moment where the author of that book, who was a survivor of the Holocaust, said he was in the concentration camps and he watched. And to paraphrase what he wrote that was so impactful on me, he said, who were in the concentration camps, we saw those people who comforted others even though they were suffering. We saw those people who were sharing their only piece of bread even though they themselves were starving. It was a testimony to the greatest of all freedoms in human existence, the ability to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. My father said that he knew that no matter what his circumstance, no matter what was said about him, no matter what was done to him, if every single day he stood up with this defiant attitude, I am a child of God. God has a destiny for me. There are things that are within me that is stronger than anything without me. And I'm going to show this world that you could put a whole bunch of concrete right down on my head, but I will be that stubborn tireless, indefatigable blade of grass that sticks its head up through the concrete and says to the world, I am here. And this is the story of us, of generations of Americans who came from the most difficult of circumstances, who were told not only that they weren't good enough, that they were subhuman, who were told they were second class, women and minorities and so many others, who were told that they weren't good enough, that said, that is not acceptable, I will not believe what you say, I will stand up with a defiant love and show this world who I am. It's a story of the abolitionists who carved out of this country the greatest infrastructure project ever, the Underground Railroad. Black folks and white folks who said, I don't care what this country says about African Americans, we will rise, we will be free. It's been those folks who were immigrants to our country who told they were subhuman, not good enough, put into slums, working in sweatshops, child labor, who still said this is not who we are. We are going to fight. We're going to push for workers' rights, and we're going to fight, and we're going to push for public education, because we may be in the slums now, but we will rise. It's those folks who were denied citizenship in my father's generation, who didn't sit back and wait for justice to come. I know King said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But nobody waited around for the arc to bend. They went out and bent it. They stood before dogs, they stood before fire hoses and said, every day you will see me, I am here, and you may try to push us into segregated neighborhoods, but we will rise, this country will rise. We will rise up to fulfill the promise of this nation that we are a nation of liberty and justice for all. And so, this is the call of your generation right now. There's so many folk who want us to become adjusted to injustice. I live in the Central Ward of Newark, New Jersey. And I can't be satisfied with my country when I have children in my community, children in my state, that have it easier to find unleaded gasoline than unleaded water. I can't be satisfied to live in a nation that professes justice and liberty, but yet we have a nation of mass incarceration, where 1 out of every 4 human beings on this planet who are imprisoned are in the United States. Where we have a nation, like a friend of mine says, that you get treated better in the criminal justice system if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. I can't be satisfied in a nation where people put aside life-saving prescription drugs simply because they can't afford it. I can't be satisfied in a nation that professes that education is the pathway but underfunds their schools. Now, this stuff sounds my lofty stuff, but it impacts me every day. When I walk my neighborhood, I've had a shooting on my block last year where Shahad Smith was murdered with an assault weapon right at the top of the street that I live. I can't accept a country where about 90 people die every day because guns are so easy to get. I can't accept a country where we treat drug addiction or mental illness more with prison than we do with health care and treatment. But the question isn't talking about these problems. It goes back to what my father says. Those of us that are individuals that see these problems, the question is what are we going to do about it? And the biggest challenge I see, the opposite of justice, is not injustice, it's apathy and indifference. What makes a difference in this world is not what politicians do or elected officials do, because we still live in a country where the power of the people is greater than the people in power. And so I want to end with just trying to make that point to everyone here about your individual ability to make a difference, to stand up and say that I'm called to be something, because every great person I know that has impressed me, has shown me under the most difficult circumstances, they're willing to stand up even though people can't. Heck, I had this funny experience. I was at a cocktail party, or excuse me, it was like a brunch, and a friend of mine walked me over to meet this guy that I was really excited to meet. I had never met him before. His name's Tyler Perry, and I was going over to meet him, and my friend was just like, this is Cory Booker. He's like, yeah, shakes my hand, and he starts talking to my friend, and my friend goes, where are you going to go next? Where's your where are you appearing next? And he goes, oh, I got to go to Newark. That's my home city. I looked at him, I said, don't be talking about my city. That's what my look was. But my friend said, oh my God, you don't know, this is going to be the next mayor of Newark. And he looked so embarrassed and he apologized. And he said, I'm so sorry, I'm excited to go to Newark, I'm just tired. He goes, I'll tell you what, when I come to your city, I'll go to dinner with you. And I said, all right, Tyler Perry's taking me out to dinner, that's all right. And I'll never forget him just telling me his story. A guy who faced abuse in his childhood, a guy that was told that he could not amount to anything, a guy that had a dream that he was going to be a playwright, but very little support to do it, a guy that worked so hard to rent out a hall and do his first play, and then he was an utter failure. And then he had those people around him saying, see, I told you you wouldn't amount to anything. But he didn't give up. Even when he was homeless, he would sit in his car, homeless, writing out the next play. He didn't let failure become an end. Failure is not final if you don't give up. He went out and just said to himself, hey, I'm going to find a different way to do it. Ended up doing a play, and this time he gave away free tickets, and folk like free stuff, so they came, and they found out it was amazing, and that was the launch of his career. And so I want to end with just a story to show you that one person, if you individually stand up against oppression, injustice, stand up against the challenging things that are being heaped upon you, if you, like my father, every single day choose your attitude that no matter what, I'm going to be a person that makes sacrifices and struggles for the dream that's important to me. Because in life, you can't rise if you're not willing to let things go. My father said there's two ways to go through life, a thermometer or a thermostat. If you are a thermostat, you just reflect the world around you. You reflect the world of mediocrity. You reflect the world of injustice. But if you're a thermometer, you set the temperature in a room. And so here's the story I want to end with, which is just simply this. My father, thanks to the generosity and kindness of people in his hometown in North Carolina, had a chance to go to college. He didn't have enough money, so they took a collection in church. And they sent him off to a small college in North Carolina called North Carolina Central University, an HBCU. And my dad gets there and sees a civil rights movement happening and gets involved. And again, you see all these people from all over our nation working together. He gets out of college, and because of the civil rights movement, he goes to Washington, D.C., and becomes the first African-American hired by IBM as a salesman in their entire Virginia area. And he's thrilled, and he starts doing well. They may have had low expectations, but he becomes one of their top 5 salesmen in the company. He's so proud. He gets a promotion to New Jersey, where I would grow up. I was just a baby, but he started looking for homes in New Jersey, and every time they would show up in a neighborhood that was a white neighborhood, they would be told that there's no homes for sale, or that the house they were looking at was sold already, or that it was pulled off the market. They knew they were encountering racism. And my father, he's not one to give up. My mom, not one to give up, and so they started looking around to see who could help them, and they found this small group of people called the Fair Housing Council, this group of blacks and whites who were working together to end the racism in housing, end the discrimination, and amazingly, they set up a sting operation where my parents would go look at a house, they would leave, and after they were told it was sold, and the white couple would come there and look at the house and say, is this house still for sale? And they would be told yes. On the house that I grew up in, my parents were told the home was sold. The white couple came and found the house was still for sale. And literally the white couple makes a bid on the house for my parents. The bid was accepted, papers drawn up. And the day of the closing, the day to sign the contracts to buy the house, the white couple did not show up in the real estate agent's office. My father did, and a lawyer. And they walk in and they confront the real estate agent. And that lawyer, I imagine, probably practiced that speech in front of the mirror all night long. He walks up to them and says, you're in violation of New Jersey fair housing law, federal fair housing law. You're violating the principles of this country. But he didn't get any speech out. Because as soon as he walked up to the real estate agent and confronted him, the real estate agent stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face. And then he sigs a dog on my dad. Now let me tell you something. Every time my dad told this story as I was growing up, the dog would get bigger. Eventually, it was like, son, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. But that's the story of how I grew up, where I grew up. The persistence of my parents, the generosity of other Americans who knew that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But that's not the point of the story. Years pass. I get to high school. I'm like a lot of you. I got involved. I was a student officer. I was an honor roll student. I worked hard. I had parents that say every day you sacrifice. Then I do well in football. I'm a high school All-American football player. I go to Stanford University. Yes, I got into Stanford because of a 4.0, 1,600. 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. I did a master's degree at Stanford. I went overseas on something called the Rhodes Scholarship. I went to Yale Law School. I kept fighting, kept giving up, kept sacrificing. The less TV, more books. Do things that other people don't do. You'll get the results that other people don't get. I did everything I can. Eventually, I got to Newark, was elected as city councilman, elected mayor, elected to the Senate. And eventually, I get to the Senate. And then I decide something. I do something wrong. I'm embarrassed to admit this to you. I pause to say thank you. How many of us have people we could give gratitude to? One of the most generous gifts you can give is to say thank you to someone who helped you along the way. And so I go, as I'm writing a book about these stories, to go find the people from my childhood and from my past who helped me get to where I am. Most of the people we can't thank, they're from generations before who marched for us, sweat for us, bled for us, died for us. People whose names aren't even remembered in the history books because they never mistook significance for celebrity, popularity for purpose. They're people who lived their lives in service for others, humble lives. I couldn't thank them, but for this case, I found the people that helped my family move back in the neighborhood. The first person I found was an African-American woman who was head of the Fair Housing Council back in the 60s. She was easy to find because she's still head of the Fair Housing Council now. She's 92 years old, has spent her whole life with her hands on the plow, fighting for other people. That is her purpose. I got on my knees before her. I thanked her in my office. I told her I am where I am because of you, and then I asked her, I got to meet these lawyers, mostly white lawyers. I said, I want to meet them. She sent me to the head lawyer. And this is what I want to leave you with. The conversation I had with this man. When I found him, he was 84 years old, I think. Now he's passed away. I'm glad I did. This was about 2015. And I have this long conversation where he confirms the facts of the story for me for my book. It was not a pack of wolves, just a dog. But then I ask him at the end of the conversation, why would you in the 1960s help black families move into your neighborhood? He had just started his business. He was busy. He worked hard. He was tired. He didn't have that much money. And yet he was helping black families move in at a time that there were irrational fears of white flight and property values going down. And this is why he told me. And this is the point I want to leave you with. I asked him why, and he said, why? Why did I help? He goes, because one day I was sitting comfortable on my couch watching TV. It's something a lot of folk do. Give that box hours and hours of their lives, get nothing in return. And he was just sitting there one night watching a Sunday movie morning. Now, you all won't remember this. Some of the older folks in this room, this was back in the day. They only had 3 channels that would go off at 11 o'clock, play the national anthem. And he says they did something during this TV movie he was watching called Judgment at Nuremberg. They cut away from the movie to show a bridge in Alabama. Now, this bridge in Alabama is called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It plays an important role in the civil rights movement because what he was seeing was these marchers who started in Selma and were going to march to the capital of the state in Montgomery. These young activists, not much more older than you are, led by a man named John Lewis, who was then not much older than you are. They were going to march and demand equal voting rights. Now, this is important because right now in America, they're rolling back voting rights. But these young people and others said, we're going to do something about it. So they start marching in Selma. They get to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This white man in New Jersey is watching on TV because they get stopped by Alabama state troopers with billy clubs and weapons saying, you shall not pass. And I know the story because John Lewis is now Cedric Richmond and my colleague. And so this guy decides, that John Lewis, that they can't pass. They're not going to meet that armed force with their own violence. They instead decide they're going to pray and turn around. But just as they are starting to pray, this man in New Jersey is watching TV and sees those state troopers shoot tear gas. They gas these marchers. And then they storm into them with billy clubs and start bashing them and beating them. John Lewis, the head of that march, had his skull cracked open, bled that bridge red with his own blood. And this man in New Jersey, comfortable on his couch, watching TV, like my father in a classroom, like people in World War II who volunteered for duty, like activists in the suffrage movement. They didn't stay on that couch like the greatest of American traditions. This one man on a couch in New Jersey stood up and said, I got to do something about that. But then he realized his limitations. He couldn't afford a ticket to Alabama. He was running a business. He couldn't afford time away from his business. But he didn't give up. He remembered the truth of America. He remembered that we can't allow our inability to do everything to undermine our determination to do something. He didn't get caught up in that state I always call sedentary agitation. When you're so upset about what's going on in the world, but you don't get up and do something about it. You talk about it, but you can't be about it. You talk right, but you do nothing. He said those immortal words, 10 two-letter words, are the secret to all change throughout history. If it is to be, it is up to me. And he decided that he would do the best he could with what he had where he was. So he started calling around in New Jersey and said, who needs some help on civil rights issues? He found this woman, Lee Porter, and they went to work. 4 years later, that was 1965, he gets a case file with my parents' names on it, Carrie and Carolyn Booker, and he goes to work on my case. Think about that power. Here are a bunch of defiant marchers on a bridge in the 1960s that just by standing up for what was right, just by doing something on one day, they release an energy into the universe that instantaneously leaps 1,000 miles and changed the heart of one man on a couch in New Jersey who then goes on and gets to work and changes the outcome for one person standing before you, changes the outcome for generations not yet born. That is the spiritual power we all have when we stand up. We send chain reactions into the world that make changes we might not ever see or witness, but in this nation, in this world, no matter what they say about you, if you decide who you are and what you will stand for, by you standing up and standing strong, you liberate others to do so as well. By you standing up and standing strong, you make changes that you may never see. By you standing up and challenging and inspiring others to stand with you, that's how our nation changes. No matter how dark things seem, no matter how hard the path, if we stand together, if we work together, this nation will rise. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, that boy got hops.
Can I ask a favor? I have an Instagram account with about 500,000 followers. Yeah, can I put you all on my Instagram stories? And, okay, hold on, shh. I need everybody quiet before we dismiss everybody. So I'm just gonna stand here saying I am inspired by being here with inspired students, and I wanna let them say hello, and then I'm gonna turn around, and you all gotta make some noise. And this is the kind of noise I want you to make. Can you make some noise so that they hear you in Jersey? All right, here we go. Let's come on, stand here. Shh. I'm so inspired to be in New Orleans right now. We have some inspired students with us, don't we?
Yeah, we have a lot of them. 5,000.
5,000 students. Make some noise!